Wife files for divorce, husband takes separation of property too far. The happiest day of her life turned into a nightmare because of a stupid prank played by her husband. Immediately, the woman filed for a divorce and thought that she would be done with the man. However, the wife didn't know that her husband was about to cross all the boundaries regarding the ownership of property. No one could understand why Catherine decided to marry Chris, but she was sure going to regret it. Everybody knew that the man was a prankster, and his schemes made some people laugh. However, at the wedding, his practical joke went too far, which made Catherine divorce him. She thought that this would put an end to his foolish stunts, but little did she know that their house was the next target. Chris enjoyed pulling pranks on his friends, his family, and even his co-workers. People wondered if he would ever run into someone who didn't find his jokes all that funny, some even hoped for it. He would always get away with his tricks because people found it funny despite his jokes being nasty, even cruel sometimes. But it would soon come one day when Chris's jokes would definitely go too far, and he would pay dearly for it. Catherine was one of his admirers. She used to laugh at his humor and eventually fell in love with Chris. Catherine was a very insecure person. Perhaps that's why she got attracted to Chris, his confidence, his unapologetic humor, even his lack of care about whether others found his jokes funny or not. It was their wedding day. The woman had worked hard to look her best and she couldn't have asked more. However, her most special day was about to turn into a nightmare, and all thanks to her husband, Chris. Everyone was being sweet to her, and she hoped, maybe even believed, that she had just taken the best decision of her life in marrying Chris. But she was in for a surprise. Being a prankster, the husband had planned a few tricks on his wedding day, too. You're probably familiar with the common trope of the groom applying some cake on his wife's cheeks. Unfortunately, Chris decided to take this common trope one step further and pushed Catherine's whole face into the cake. Her whole dress, makeup, and hair were a mess, and she was left completely embarrassed. Apart from Chris, nobody was laughing. The guests were stunned and angry because this time he went too far. Poor Catherine started crying under a thick layer of cake and ran from there, her family and friends following her. The next morning, without any hesitation, the woman filed for divorce, as she could no longer keep up with his tricks. But her nightmare with Chris didn't end there. Turns out that both Chris and Catherine married in a regime of separation of property, which means that in the event of divorce, both wife and husband retain possession of each of their assets. There was only one major asset that was shared by the two of them, the house. And Chris decided to take the separation of property his own way in order to pull his last big prank, the greatest of all his life. The ex-wife was at the house grieving over all the years she wasted on a man who never took things seriously. Meanwhile, the prankster was planning to split the house in half, literally. The man worked in construction, and somehow, he managed to get a grab on several machines. He spent the whole night working on a renovation for their home. By the time the sun rose, the house was sawed in two halves. He didn't stop there. He took one half of the house, supposedly the one he single-handedly considered his own, took it with him and dropped it at his parents' garden. There was no information on what Catherine did with her half of the house, or whether she found someone else after this event. But one thing is for certain, even if she regretted all the years she had wasted with a man like Chris, she could be glad that she had the sense to end it in time. Things could have gotten really ugly if they had decided to have kids. What is known about Chris is that his reputation definitely took damage from that incident. Some of his friends finally came to terms with the fact that his jokes not only were not funny at times but also cruel. And a lot of people, even some of his closest ones, lost all respect for Chris. Staying in a relationship with someone that, deep in your gut, you know is not the right person is something that happens all the time to many people. Inner insecurities, fear of the unknown, or just plain infatuation can make you overlook blatant red flags and go all the way to the altar with a wrong person.